Hi, how are you? Welcome back to Daily Knits. I'm using some new unicorn needles, but I realized as I was going through all my needles that I have a ton. So, which one do I choose for which project? What needles do I actually need? And as I'm cleaning out my stash, are there some that I can get rid of? Let's dive into all things knitting needles. Let's go. But first, I'm Liz, an avid knitter, crocheter, and spinner, and I love all things yarn and fiber. I'm a little obsessed. If you're like me, then this is the place for you. I want to build a community of like minded people to share all things yarn and just have a great time. So please hit the subscribe button down below, and now we'll get back to the content. All right, so let's dive into all things needles. I've been knitting for a very long time and have kind of developed a stockpile of knitting needles. When I was just starting out, I really didn't know what I needed, and this was a long time ago, and YouTube wasn't around to help me pick the right ones. I've also developed a taste. Right? When you're just beginning, you really don't know what you need or what you like. And I was young at the time, so I had more energy, and I was able to work through the frustrations that some of my bad choices might have caused. Starting with straight needles. I'm sure if you've knitted for any type of length of time or bought any one of those kits, they all come with these straight, extremely long needles. Um, as you can hear from my voice, these are not my favorites. Very long. Some of them come a little bit shorter, but then you're limited to what you can actually make with this. There's only so many stitches that this can hold, and if you overload it with stitches, as you work on your project, they're going to become heavier and heavier and heavier. If you're working on something that's fairly small, then these might work for you. But to be honest, they've never really worked for me. Most of them come as metal, some type of aluminum. And while they are fairly light, that weight does um, factor in. They also can come, I've had some plastic ones. I did like those better, just a smidge. And then they also come, I do have a bamboo set. But still, I don't even know why I have these anymore. I should probably just get rid of them. All right. So finally, I turned to circular knitting needles. And the rest of the time, we're going to be talking about these because these are what I like. I started my life using, let's see, where did you go? These needles. And these are the simple, cheap ones, but most circular knitting needles are the same. They're going to have a length of the needle right here, attached between one cord. So there's two needles, one cord, um, and they're different lengths. So you can get the needle a different length if you need that. You can get this cable a different length if you need that. There's lots and lots of choices. So let's start with the length of the needle. This is a good length for me and most people. This is probably the standard length. Although some of your shorter knitting needle, or shorter circular knitting needles are going to have this shorter length needle. And so these are more for knitting in the round. And the round is going to be a smaller one. So it's like a sleeve or a hat. And so I think by necessity, they do have to be shorter. But for me and my hands, you can see right here, it almost completely covers. And so that means that this finger is right here and that joint, it bothers me. But just a small bother. These are still super helpful for knitting in the round if you don't want to use the double point needles, which I'll get to at the end of this video. So mostly come in standard length. You want them to fit in your hand comfortably. I like to have the entire length of the needle in my hand, so I don't have to feel the cable at all. So the next thing that you want to look at is the tip of the knitting needles. This is a pretty standard tip, and I believe that these are like a cheap one that you can get at Walmart. And I like this tip, not too sharp. It has a nice taper right here. These are good. You can get ones that are blunter and ones that are sharper. So here is a pair of lace needles, and you can see how the taper is longer and this is a little sharper. The reason that you want to, you in general, if you're just starting out, you want to select the middle of the road ones. Um, if you're kind of advanced or you know that you're going to be doing some lace knitting, these sharper ones are going to pick up those smaller gauge of yarn easier. And so it will make your life just a tad easier. And you don't want to use super blunt ones on like lace knitting. That can be challenging. Now the Addi needles have a specific different type of tip that is extremely blunt. But I found that as I work with them more and more, that doesn't seem to bother me. So the same tip is actually on my flexi flips as well, and we're working with fingering gauge yarn, and I find it works for me. I can go pretty fast. I don't feel like I'm missing stitches or anything like that. So it's just based on your preference or what kind of tip that you'd like. I recommend going very middle of the road. All right, so we talked about the length of the needle, the tip of the needle. What are they made of? So I've got lots of different types here. Actually, two. There's wood, and I've worked with a lot of the bamboo ones. I have not actually bought a wood set yet, but I have lots of bamboo ones. And then you can get aluminum. I don't know if I've seen plastic. Comment down below if you've used plastic circular knitting needles where the needle is plastic. That would be interesting. I think I'd like to try those out. I do prefer the metal, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But the thing about the wood is that while they are lightweight and very smooth, occasionally with the bamboo, you'll get one that starts to splinter. And for me, the splinter is sometimes down here. But anyway, that splinter catches yarn as you push it through, making this a piece of garbage. So I try to avoid these. When I was younger, whenever I'd seen knitting needles on sale, I'd grab whatever was there, and that's what I have a lot of. So these bamboo ones, apparently not a lot of people like them because they're always on sale. Um, but yeah, that's occasionally what happens. Not fun, and also it's uncomfortable for your hands. So that's why I try to stick to the metal. The other thing about the metal is that it makes a click sound as you're working, which for me is another way of kind of understanding my knitting and my rhythm. And so I kind of like the sound that they make. It's helpful. So that's another reason why I like the metal ones. And they're smoother. I don't have to worry about splinters or anything like that. I feel that they move better through the yarn itself. Yep. Next, man, there's a lot to talk about with knitting needles, right? Is this cable. Yes. So this one is in red. They can be plastic and clear. I've got one here that's in green. I believe this, I'm not sure if this is plastic or metal or just maybe a coated metal. And then we've got stainless steel ones right here. What you're going to get at, let's say, Walmart is a plastic. Where's my Walmart ones? Here they are. Ah, that can be a lot. You're going to get one like this. And if you see, it has a lot of memory, which is it keeps it spiral that it was packaged in really easily. And so this can be challenging to work with and can lead to frustration. So if you're just starting out, I recommend spending just a little more money to get something that doesn't have hardly any memory in it. So, for instance, like this or this one, as you can see, these were packaged very similarly, but they have absolutely no memory in them. There's no spiral, there's no boingy, boingy, boingy. Um, this is what you ideally want to work with, because your work will hang here and you don't have that spiral to push your work through, and there's less frustration, trust me. Um, so very nice. And then you are going to get some when they get longer that do have some memory to them. So this is a 47 inch, that's from tip to tip, 47 inches. And it does have memory in it. So I have a few like this that are longer. They've got some memory. This is a new pair of needles, so I'm sure that that will work out. But for that longer one, I don't mind the memory. My work is never in this circle right now, and so I can keep it spiraled up like that, and it'll work just fine. So memory is okay, but it can be frustrating. Now, a trick that I learned a long time ago with these cheap ones that have lots of memory is that very carefully and quickly, if you dip this in some boiling water, like for a second, bring it out, straighten it out, you'll get rid of that memory. But it's temporary. And so once you store it again, that memory comes right back. So I don't, and you could melt the cable or burn yourself. So I don't recommend it, but it is something that you can do. All right. So one thing to note about the cables, if you have any animals, is that your needles are attached and they're swinging around with everything else. Um, Kitty cats love to come up and say, that sounds tasty. And so they might chew on that metal. And like right here, I have um, it's like a, it's like a bite mark, but since this is a plastic coated stainless steel, um, it's significant enough that it catches the yarn, and renders these almost unusable. I think that if I put some heat there, I could smooth that out, but I don't know. And then these were my favorite until the dog got to them and decided to chew on them. So, yes, take care of your knitting needles. Make sure that you always have a project bag to store them in. All right. So, the last thing we haven't talked about before I get into all those special knitting needles is your length. They come in different lengths. This one might be a 60. Um, let's see, does it say on here? It does not. I really liked these. This one was 47. We've got really short ones right here, like 16 and 12 inches. And so this is all about what project you're working on. So this would be more for like an afghan or a shawl where you know you're going to get a large number of stitches, like 200, 300 stitches. Something short like this is for a hat where you're knitting in the round, you have 100 stitches, but you're making a circle, or a much shorter project. And then there's those middle of the road ones that are just good for about anything. I believe on these I've knitted a shawl on them too. So they do accommodate quite a bit of stitches. It does get kind of, let's say it's all bunched up like sardines. But it works. So if I was just starting out and I was recommending a length to somebody, I'd pick a length between 24 and 45. Um, Sitting in that 30 inch or 32, whatever it comes in range. You can do a lot with that. And except for like, if you're knitting sleeves or stuff like that, anything in the round. So it's a good general range to get. All right, so there are lots of special knitting needles that have come out. I believe in a previous video I showed off the Flexi Flips. Those are for sock knitting and an alternative to your double point knitting needles, which have a point on both ends. Um, I really like those. They're worth the money most definitely if you're into sock knitting, but they're specifically for sock knitting. You can also get square knitting needles. I had a set of square double pointed knitting needles that I really, really liked. I felt that they were easier to hold when I was doing the sock knitting and they kept the stitches on really well. I'm interested to try them on a circular knitting needle and see how they work there. And then talking about how needles are shaped, most are round. And then we talked about the square ones. And then I recently got these unicorn knitting needles. And I think it's a compromise between the round ones and the square ones. Um, and the advantage of this is it's easier to grip, so it's not super smooth. And then, interestingly enough, I think that the stitches flow better on it. But more to come on that. I'm still really undecided if they're worth it or not. And then lastly, we have all those interchangeable sets. Um, Here's my opinion on it. It might be controversial, so let me know what you think about interchangeable sets in the comments down below. I think they're a waste of money. And this is why. I find that I only use a few different knitting needle sizes. I use 10, 6, and 4. And then I only use one size for my socks, but that doesn't really matter because you wouldn't get interchangeable knitting needles for that. Take that back. You might, but still, you'd only use one size. So that's maybe 4, possibly 5 knitting needles that I'm ever going to use. So the other sizes in there are never going to get touched. Now, I did buy some interchangeable knitting needles, not as a set, but individually. They were on sale again. And I found that one of my struggles was that the this connection, so this cable knitting comes off so you can put on different needles. This would get loose and then your stitches would get stuck on it. And so you're always having to tighten it up. Um, it is nice to have all the different sizes so I can take one needle and have lots of different lengths of that. But in terms of having lots of projects going and stuff, if I want to use a number 6 US 6 knitting needle circular for 3 different projects, well, with an interchangeable needle set, I'm still going to have 2 more needles, 2 more sets of needles. So in that sense, might as well just store these appropriately and only have the ones that I like and be done with it. So for the price, I don't really think they're worth it. That's my opinion. Let me know what you think down below. And that is an overview of all things knitting needles. So thank you for joining me. Bye.